Okay, hello and welcome back. This video is going to talk about how to expand on the previous palletizing video and talk about how to implement the multiple layers. Again, as with the last video, I'm not going to show every last step. Specifically, I'm not going to show logic for how the gripper opens and closes. I'm not going to do any of the logic for how to place the parts. This is just the looping logic for the palletization. You should be able to take what you've learned from this and the other video and apply it to the place side. As we know previously from the last video, we're using shifts or offsets to move the robot to the next location in the X or Y direction without having to necessarily move or teach each of those points. And so as I move from one point to the next, to the next, to the next, I've only taught this first point here. And so that's the power and the advantage of using a shift instead of having to do each individual point. And so in this logic, we have an inner loop and an outer loop. But before we do that, we do some housekeeping up top again, as previously discussed. And then we can come in, and this is what the inner loop is. As we've seen in the past, we've got the move to home position to go up to a clear, safe spot. We're going to turn on our shift, and we do that after the home position because we want the home position to remain stationary. We don't want to have that incrementing. And then we move to the approach, the pick, do our gripper logic, go back to the approach point, which is now my retract point functionally, turn off the shift, and in my case, I'm going back to home. This at line 13 is where you would put other stuff potentially in your program to do the place component. And then we do increment. We're incrementing both our counter and our position information. And this is where, like I said previously, the place would go. And then we're checking to see if we're done. If not, go back, do it again. Once we have completed the inner loop, we can go to the outer loop. And this is after the inner loop is done. Once this evaluates as false, it drops down to line 17. We reset the counter for X because we want to go back and restart. If this is our X direction and this is our Y direction, we want to make sure that we reset back to here. Otherwise, your next point's going to be back there and there and there and there. And so we're resetting our counter. We're incrementing our second counter for the Y. We're incrementing the Y value. And then, as I've mentioned previously, the set E instruction resets just the X component of our variable. In our variable, let's go back to variable 1 here. The set E resets this X back to 0, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so that's what that instruction does. We then check to see if we've completed our Y loop. If we haven't, it goes back up again. If we have, on the single layer logic, it then ends the program. And for the multi-layer, it's just a continuation of that single layer logic. So we still have our inner loop and we still have our outer loop, but we will then add a third layer or a third loop, and I'm calling it layers in this case. And what it's going to require is another position variable, another counter, and you have to remember to reset both X and Y. So before at line, what is now line 21 in my program, I'm only setting X back to 0. Here at 26 and 27, you'll see I set X and Y back to 0. If you don't do both of those, again, you'll start shifting things off, and either you will be dropping things off into space, or you're going to be hitting the back of the cart or something like that. And so our variables, if you remember, under position variable, we're at position variable 1, 2 was Y65, and we're going to do a third one, and we do this to set it to robot, which is what we're using. And this is where we set our Z value, and I think it's about 55. you will want to make sure you are setting the correct value. If you don't and you use mine, it's either going to drop them or it's going to crash and you're going to have a collision. So now whenever I add P003 to my P001, it will increment the Z here. Again, we are putting all of our place instructions here on the inner. They don't go with the outer loop. They have to be part of the inner loop. And that should pretty much give you what you need. Here's a slightly larger version of it, the middle chopped out because that stays the same. And as you can see here, when I do my clear at line 23, I'm clearing 2 of the byte variables instead of 1. So it's going to clear 0 and 1, which is my X and my Y, because I have to reset both of those. I'm incrementing 2, which is my third or my Z counter. I'm adding P003, which I just showed you, back into P000, and then I'm clearing back 000 element 1, which is X, and element 2, which is Y, back to their appropriate locations. And then I do my check to see how many layers I have. If I were to do 3 layers or 4 layers or 5 layers, all I have to then do is change this greater than or less than 2, to the appropriate value. And so here is the program running. You'll see the robot dip into each of these, then come over, dip into each of these, and then for the second Z level, it will not quite come into those and stop short of that. You'll see here what I'm talking about in a second. And so going into the first location, second location, and shift over. And then after this last one, it'll go back to the first location again, but it'll stop short and go higher basically. And so you can see here where we're going to functionally what are each of the locations, but at a Z of plus 55. And so that is the multi-layer palletization. As always, thanks for watching.